Now, contrary to popular consumer belief, upselling can actually be a really good thing for a customer. That's provided the sales professional is upselling to benefit the customer, the buyer, and not themselves. Now, if you want to upsell to a customer, you have to, in my view, believe the implications, first of all, of getting it wrong, and then how to ensure that you're doing it right for the right reasons. To do that, you should understand buyer behaviors when it comes to buying more than what they set out to buy or more than they need. So let's start with those negative implications first. Now, we're told that upselling to a consumer can cause bigger issues based on the fact that consumers are easily convinced to buy more than they need. It has been blamed for, in part, for some of the populations becoming overweight, which has caused worldwide concerns in obesity. Supermarkets have been preying on buying habits for many years, as we know, with their offers to buy more for less, even though some of their offers don't actually add up to a real saving. Now, more recently, we saw a slightly different type of upselling behavior in that it wasn't influenced by the seller, but more by the consumer themselves. And what I'm referring to here is when, at the start of the COVID pandemic, mainly domestic and some business buyers, I must say, turned to stockpiling of everyday items, which they neither needed or had the room to store. In fact, some people had to alter living arrangements just to be able to stock this stuff. I mean, I imagine that given some of those people then had to work from home and make room to work, that must have caused some issues. Anyway, that aside, I think we've all regretted buying too much of something at some point. So what drives us to buy more than we need? Now, I don't want to encourage the wrong kind of selling here. So when we talk about these drivers and understanding these drivers, I want us to think about how upselling can be positive. All of the above that I've just talked about portrays upselling as a bad thing. And it can be if you're not upselling for a good reason. And that good reason should be transparent to both you and the buyer. So let's first of all recognize those drivers behind the desire to buy more, so we can put that knowledge to a positive use. Now, the first driver in my book is the proactive survival driver. That's when people buy to the what if scenario. The second one is ego status, stretching budgets to show that they can afford it or to reflect their wealth or status. And the third one is impulse. That's just a desire arisen from the senses and the emotions at that moment in time. So what you need to do with this knowledge to be able to sell professionally and for the right reasons is you just need to include discussions with the buyer which will help you to cover the following. First of all, what would happen if they didn't have the upsell? So that is in line with the proactive survival driver. Secondly, to be in line with the ego driver, you would ask them something about how it would make them feel if they had the upsell. And finally, number 3, does anything about the upsell appeal right now? And that is in line with the impulse driver. So there's questions here that you can easily plan into your interactions. And remember, you should only upsell if it benefits them and the solution to do so. Just to make sure I'm not alienating those of you working in B2B, because it sounds like I'm just talking about B2C, but it actually is just the same. With B2B, you just simply change the context to adjust your question. So the context for proactive survival is just making sure that the investment is protected and it's sustainable. Number 2, the ego status, that's about challenging the status quo. And thirdly, impulse, that would be seen during the negotiation stage if the risk is low enough for you to be able to trade or give as a concession something in addition. Now, what you would need to find out during your discussions with the buyer, i.e. the type of questions you should ask your buyer, should be connected to or based on the return that they would get from that additional purchase. So, for example, how important is sustainability to them? That would be the question I would ask that fits in with the survival driver. The other one was, how important is it to engage more peers into this? So talking about engaging more people into something that this buyer is looking at can uplift their status within that peer group. And finally, what would you need to demonstrate to upsell now? And that's a question you can ask just to get a feel for what the impulse situation is right there, and then where are their emotions based on that additional offering that you've talked about. So this is how I think you can upsell to people. Of course, you'd need to plan the words and questioning based on your customer and the stage in your sales process, but by knowing these underlying reasons why people buy more should be useful information. Remember, upselling is not about selling something the customer doesn't want. It's just about making sure they have all angles covered, the letters crossed and dotted. I personally have experienced times when the seller didn't advise me that I might need an additional part to make whatever I've bought work, for example. I mean, it could be something as simple as an extra battery pack for a camcorder, which then, you know, you have to go and buy later on, which delays the process of using that particular purchase. Or for me, another example would be when I'm selling, it'd be like if I didn't talk about or discuss the opportunity of selling an additional evaluation tool for a training course that somebody's investing in. Because what's the point of training if you can't sustain it, right? Another example might be estate agents, you know, selling a house without access rights, for example. Now, it all fits nicely with my upcoming video, which is about solution selling, which I'll talk to you about later. But for now, I just need you to think of upselling as a means of helping the buyer. As professionals, we shouldn't prey on our knowledge of buying habits, but we should use it to help out buyers secure their investments. So here's a reminder of knowledge that I've just given you today and what you should consider to discuss with your buyer in order to sell the bigger picture. So here are the 3 drivers again. 1, proactive survival, 2, ego status, and 3, impulse. Remember those when you're planning your discussions. Remember, plan those discussions, plan the questions around these, and it'll make it better, it'll make it easier for you to be able to sell the additional products that you believe would benefit the buyer when they're buying the core product. Right, so that's it for this week's video. I hope it's been helpful to you. I'll speak to you next week. Until then, continue to stay safe. Take care.